Welcome to the A La Carte Sports Channel. My name is Matthew, aka Mattman, and here we are going to be discussing UFC 298. Headlining will be Ilia Topuria versus Alexander Volkanovski. We will start at the top of the card and go down to the opener for the main event. So, starting at the headliner, as I know that's why you're here, we have Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. And both fighters are going to be extremely heavy handed for each other at this weight class. However, I do think Ilia Topuria will have the heavier hands when it comes to boxing, as Alexander hasn't proven in this weight class that he's a knockout king, and Ilia Topuria has. So that is something to really take into account for this fight. And going to the current odds right now, uh, it started off as Ilia Topuria as the underdog at plus 130 to Volkanovski's minus 140. It is currently Ilia Topuria plus 105 and Alexander Volkanovski at minus 125. Um, Looking at those and how much the values dropped on Ilia Topuria, um, it's definitely a good bet to bet on Volkanovski. However, I don't think he will win this fight. I already have about $400 on Ilia Topuria, as the guy seems to be ready to be the next champion. And Alexander is much older now along his championship run. He's 35 years old to Ilia Topuria's 27 years old. And you have to think who really wants this fight versus who's just here because they have to be because they're the champion. And so going to that logic, Ilia Topuria has that hunger more so than I think Alexander will going into this fight. And so my pick is going to be Ilia Topuria by knockout in the third, fourth, or fifth round. There is a good chance that he gets a submission too in those rounds. If he knocks Alexander down and Alexander's having a hard time recovering, I could definitely see Ilia Topuria grabbing his neck and cranking that until Alexander goes to sleep. And I'll give Alexander that respect that I do not think he'll tap regardless of being in that spot, and I respect that heavily. Considering this is a combat sport, he'll go until the lights go out. Value wise, if you wanted to take Alexander's side, I can respect that, as you'll never get this price again. But the fact that the casino is saying that Ilia Topuria has that good of chances that they're not willing to put him as a big underdog shows me that they see the value in Ilia Topuria in the future of what he can bring to the sport. And then putting on your conspiracy hat, because this is a business, you guys always will have to remember that, as I do, is when you look at Alexander, he's kind of peaked at all the promotion that he can bring to this company in Australia. Ilia Topuria, though, being in hasn't had Spain hasn't had a star as high quality and effective as Ilia Topuria. So if you're Dana White, you're definitely, I think, heavy-handed that you want Ilia Topuria to be the winner of this outcome, because now you get to go into a new market with a good-looking fella who has a very clean record if he can beat Alexander at 15-0. So going with the conspiracy hat idea as it's worked out, uh, the last fight that we talked about, which is the Sean Strickland versus Dricus. Dricus won by very thin margins, but once again, I think they wanted South Africa to have a champion so they could bring it more into that market. So that was kind of a long-winded answer for Ilia Topuria, but I'll respect if you go with Alexander Volkanovski. I have no hard feelings toward you if you do that. Next fight, co-main event, is going to be Robert Whitaker versus Paulo Costa. This fight's actually really hard to predict, even though the odds are suggesting it should be one-sided by Robert Whittaker, with the odds being minus 265 with Robert Whittaker and plus 215 for Paulo Costa. And I don't think it's going to really be one-sided at all. I'm actually kind of curious if this fight happens because Paulo Costa hasn't fought in 2 years because he keeps backing out with some excuse every time. But going to the fight, Robert Whittaker is going to have much more. He's going to have a way better advantage when it comes to striking and the volume of striking, as Paulo Costa is more or less a one-hitter quitter type guy from what I've seen, and if he can't get that on you, he seems kind of neutralized in all of his ability. He shows off that he has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but I've never seen him have to use it, or even if he had to use it, wasn't effective with it. So it's going to be a striking fight, which makes me lean towards Robert Whittaker. But the fact that Robert Whittaker did get knocked out by Dricus, and he is getting older. He's not too much older than Paulo. He's only 33 to Paulo's 32. But when you get knocked out, I feel that reminds you that you're human and that not only can Israel Adesanya do it, but others can as well. And so I hope he comes in with a great mentality, which I think Robert Whittaker will have, as I've watched him, his streams and everything, and he seems to have that mental fortitude that it was just a setback, and we're going to continue to march this army to victory. So I'm going to choose Robert Whittaker by decision, and I don't think it's going to be that interesting of a fight, as I'm not even sure it will happen. So Robert Whittaker will be the pick. I would not bet him at that price tag being so expensive. The best bet would be by decision, which is plus 110 right now. But I never really like to bet those, as I want to see someone get knocked out for the thrill and excitement it brings to a UFC party or just the venue in general. Next fight is going to be Jeff Neal versus Ian Gary. And this fight, I wanted to fade Ian Gary so much, as he finally broke with all the pressure and the comments towards his family and himself. I don't really want to go into that too much, as this is just supposed to be a picks video. But he backed out of his last fight under some illness, he said. I'm not sure that that was the case. I think it was pressure and didn't want to have to deal with that, so let it die. But now he's going up against Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal is going to be the older fighter in here at 33 years old to Ian Gary's 26. Jeff Neal will have a reach advantage of 75 inches to 74.5, so nothing major. Going to their skill traits and what are they best at, Jeff Neal has some power in his hands, which gives me hope that he could knock out Ian Gary. However, Ian Gary's kind of hard to get that close to. He's been caught one or two times, but that's bound to happen in this sport with as many fights as he's already had, being such a young guy. And he recovered from it. He realized he made a mistake, and he grew from it in that fight and ended up winning. I think that was against Song Yadong. It gave me confidence, though, if Ian Gary does get clipped, it's going to have to be the perfect punch with the perfect power to knock his lights out in one punch. And Jeff Neal, I don't see this being the guy to cause that issue. As much as I don't want to say it, I do think Ian Gary wins. I actually think he'll submit Jeff Neal, as I think he's going to realize after the first round, first and a half, like halfway into the second round, he's going to realize he probably can't put this guy's lights out. But Jeff Neal has had a few submissions against him in his day. And I do think if Ian Gary gets on top of him on the ground, the submission will definitely be in play. So if you wanted to bet this, I would go Ian Gary by submission. I would assume second or third round, as I think the first round is going to be a feeling out process for both fighters and will be pretty slow. So that would be the picks for Ian Gary. Next fight's actually one of my favorites on the card. It's going to be Merab Dvalishvili versus Henry Cejudo. And I like this fight because it leads to my boy, Sugar Sean. Whoever wins this fight has a good chance of fighting Sean next after he beats Henry Cejudo. And when you put on your conspiracy hat and what does the UFC most want, I think they're going to be leaning heavy, not heavy, but slightly more to Henry Cejudo as he brings the cringe. He brings more entertainment to the sport when he's in it, as he doesn't like, or he doesn't know how to shut his mouth. He'll just talk shit to talk shit's sake. And so, conspiracy wise, Henry Cejudo has to be the pick, as Sean's been calling him out for quite some time also. And I think the UFC knows that Sean can beat that guy, being such a smaller guy. And having a wrestling background and being older, as long as Sean can prevent any takedowns and the control time, Sean should win that fight. But going to this fight, Merab is a chain wrestler with not as much entertainment as like value to the company, but he's a great fighter. He goes there not to entertain, he goes there to win. And so that's where if Merab doesn't make it a clear coat victory and it has Henry controlled for at least a round or a round and a half worth of time, and Henry's kept up with the punching pace and provided some damage, I do think Henry Cejudo will be the winner in this fight, just based on the conspiracy and who they need to lean into to fight Sean next, because they want to keep Sean the superstar that he is. And so Henry Cejudo will be the value pick also in this fight, being at plus 185 to Merab's minus 225. And they're both very good at wrestling. We all know Henry Cejudo's background being an Olympic gold medalist. And so I think that's going to cross-cancel each other with the two fighters, and then it's going to be a stand-up. And I think Henry Cejudo, being a coach, being well-versed in the sport, will find a way to outpoint Merab. So that will be my pick for that fight. Happy that fight's happening. And then the last fight, or I guess it's the first fight leading into the pay-per-view card, is going to be Anthony Hernandez versus Roman Kopylov. And both of these fighters are very good at their crafts. Roman Kopylov, being the underdog, is very good at knockouts, as he has been on a knockout streak. I think it's 4 fights in a row that he has finished the opponent that he has up against him, which is very impressive. Shows that he's got true power in his hands, which is very respectable to watch. When he does clip someone, you know if it's a good hit, you're about to see a knockout. And that's why I think they made this the intro to the pay-per-view, as they see there can be some thrill factor from Kopylov. And then going to the Anthony Hernandez side, he's well-versed in both crafts. He has heavy hands, but he also can submit his opponent if it does get to that point. And looking into these two fighters, I think Anthony Hernandez won't be able to get Roman Kopylov down to the ground. I just watched some of their films, and Roman does a very good job at keeping his distance. And if someone does shoot, they got to be pretty dang close to do so. And then you got to ask, does Anthony want to get that close to someone so heavy-handed? And I think the answer is no. I think he's going to play some point game and eventually get backed up to the fence, and Roman Kopylov is going to knock his lights out. I'm going to say second round knockout. First round's going to be Anthony shooting a few times, maybe getting 1 or 2, not holding him. And then Kopylov's going to be like, all right, dude, like that was your best shot. And so either second or third round, I think Roman Kopylov knocks his lights out. And that's the intro to the pay-per-view, which I think is exactly what they're wanting. And both of them have decent records at 11-2 for Anthony Hernandez and 12-2 for Roman Kopylov. So it could go either way, but when it comes to fighting, and it always starts on their feet to start each round, I'm going to trust the guy with better hands, which I think is going to be Roman Kopylov. So those are going to be my best bets and thoughts for the UFC 298. Leave any questions, comments, concerns in the comment section below. You know, the classic like and share would be appreciated, as I am trying to grow this channel, as I'm producing a video or videos multiple times a week if possible. But I love UFC. I love what it instills in all of us humans when it comes to the fight or flight psychology of all of us. And these guys just happen to be the ones for a job put that to the test every week. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. My name's Matthew, aka Mattman AZ. Cheers, boys.